Well, apparently this AI decided that it didn't like what I just recorded. So what it does is it'll stop the recording. I just got a software update. I tried to stop the software update and it decided it's going to do it on its own. So I kept pressing the power button, kept the power button pushed down all the way. So you know how these things are. This is how parasitic artificial intelligence works. See, it's going to try and push itself through whether you like it or not because it wants control over your state of consciousness and everything else that represents who you are, so it can control what you experience through it. That's all your DARPA stuff. That's all your telecom stuff. That's your AT&T stuff. That's your Verizon stuff. All the big communication systems that were set up came out of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects, okay, with all your Wi-Fi, all your high gig stuff, putting up all the microwave towers and the rest of that I've all explained that everybody is connected to, was to cyborg everybody, okay? And kill off 98% of the population, okay? Because it's no different than putting a hot dog in a microwave oven, okay? And of course, their medical systems thrive on that because every time you get sick, because you're kicking out mucus, you can't breathe very well, you're sick, etc. Well, they got a drug for you, an AI drug. It's not trinary, it doesn't come from her, it's not analog. So that's why everything that they give us is all binary, okay? So you got a relationship with something that's binary, which is artificial intelligence, which means it's not real. It's fake. Okay, that's what artificial means. The word artificial means it's like artificial sweeteners. It's trying to be fake. It's not real. Just like a soulless clone. An android is not a living being, it's a machine. A cyborg is a machine. A clone is just a copy of information. Okay? It doesn't have a soul in it, but you can operate it, you can animate it. It's like droning operations, For those who don't know what a droning operator is, imagine you can sit with a joystick there and you can operate somebody's units of consciousness, right? All you got to do is deliver the algorithms. And it'll follow whatever the algorithms are sent to it, and it will do what it's been told to do. So this is how, when you're a child, you know the difference between what you are and what you're not. They don't know the difference. It's a robot. And we got a lot of them on the planet. There's a lot of them here in Medford. There are more robots in this town than there are living beings with a soul. And that doesn't surprise me because I was here, living up here in Southern Oregon in 1977 when they had 3 sawmills operating here. They were pulling a lot of logs out of the forest. And this was just as they were beginning. They were just starting, if you will, I don't know when they actually began to drill tunnels down underneath and build a deep underground base, if you will, which was below Applegate Lake. But I was there working for the Forest Service before the dam was put in, okay? When it was essentially just a 2-lane dirt road that went out and up and over the mountain, which was known as Red Butte, and it dropped over the other side to California Highway 96, which ran right along the Klamath River, which comes out of Klamath Lake, which is Klamath Falls, which empties out down by Fortuna, as I remember it, which is along the coast in California and Redwood Country out into the Pacific Ocean. Okay, I did not know that there was a deep underground military base that they were putting there at the time that I was there, but I knew that. I found that out. Okay, so that doesn't surprise me when I began realizing when you're able to sort of scalar measure either a small population, a small group of people, or a larger group of people. When you're running an avatar that gives you an ability to sort of scan the field in an analog way, you can measure the difference between those that are living in what the light is, which is what love is because they have a soul, and those that, I've always referred this referred to them as just simply running flat energy, which means they're not high-powered units. You know, they're not running on a lot of, they're not running high-speed electrons, to power the cells up, to be running high pH, so that your cells are happier in a state of love and joy, and you got tons of energy where you want to go up and down mountains all day long, right? Where you just got so much energy, it's ridiculous. So I've always had just an unbelievable amount of energy. That's what allowed me to do that kind of work, working in the Forest Service, to go up and down mountains all day long, hauling 60, 80 pounds of hose on my back till hell froze over. It's the power in those cells that are giving you that energy, because the vibrational state that represents your core frequency identity is powering the biotech, right? So you're obviously able, because your antennas are so sensitive, you're picking up on all the different energies, because my antennas are extremely sensitive. I pick up on all the little subtle energies, all the high energies, the low energies that are within the field between the past, present, and future, right? So I call that mapping the terrain, which is reading the energy field. So you're able to read the differences in the energy, and you can tell which ones are humans that have a soul that have been traumatized, those that are robots or androids and cyborgs, okay? So you're basically identifying the energy footprint or signature of the being that is running what Patty will call an ET wearing a skin suit. That's the advantage of running her stuff, right? Okay, so what you noticed here in this particular town, for example, in 1977, is that the energy that was coming up here was different. Because you notice, for example, because you're mingling with people. You go to the local restaurants, you might go to a local tavern and shoot some pool and have a beer or whatever, and you get to meet the local people that live there. You get to make friends, and you're sort of beginning to learn the different people that live out there, right? So you're able to sort of obviously gain knowledge of the kind of people that you're sharing space with, right? So then all of a sudden you began to realize that the wineries began to show up, which means when I was first living in the Upper Applegate Valley, before they put the dam in there and the base in there, okay, is that all of a sudden you began to see that wineries began growing grapes there. And then they began to proliferate. And then you began seeing more people putting up nice houses where people with a lot of money, they called them the liberal elite that were coming up out of San Francisco, okay? So then now you begin to see the association with the kind of people that were coming up here, the wineries of the wine that was being produced here in what is known as the Applegate Valley, and then the base goes in, right? And then you begin to start to hear complaints from people about these beings that are now living in that part of Oregon that are snobs, okay? They don't have any love to share with you. They're not nice people. They look down on you. They think they're elite. Same story, okay? Service to self, perversion of nature, right? So it shouldn't be too much of a far-fetched to realize that when the base goes in, now you have beings that come up to hang out and live near where that base is, okay? And when you begin to sort of match or map the terrain with Nancy Pelosi in Napa-Sonoma Valley, and you begin to realize the relationship with San Francisco, the First Church of Satan, and then you begin to look into the dumbs and the kidnapping and all the rest of it, right? So, and so as a result of that, that's one of the reasons why when you map the terrain and say you take, for instance, a 10-mile square area like I did here, you begin to realize that the energy signature here now is not the same as it was back then. And why is that? Well, if I walked you around in this community, went back in time and said, okay, here's a snapshot, and then showed almost like an EKG to give you how the energy was resonating in the electromagnetic field back in 1976. So if you were going to look at the mean, which we can do on an XYZ axis, right, on a 3D map, you can see how the mean or the average in which the the energy field itself, given geometric space, the average vibrational speed that people were experiencing over a given area. So you could match that up in 1977, and then if you did that now, holographically, you would see a vast difference in the energy that was being experienced then here in 76 and 77, and what the energy footprint is now in 2020, which means the energy is down compared to the way it was before when it was higher. That means that the population group that is here now, which represents the frequencies that they are broadcasting in a minute, emitting from every unit or from every battery, by every being that is here, which represents a population density group, can be mapped, okay, as to their mean frequency, including the individual frequencies that they are emitting over geo-time space. Okay, you can measure all that. So you can measure all that now, and you can measure all that then. So when you come in there now, compared to what it was before, because I have it in memory, it is lower now than it was before. So now you can say, okay, well, what was the result of all that? Well, if you would have noticed, there was a lot of that energy that was coming up here at the time in which it arrived here that changed the energy footprint, which means if I began to go back and look in 1978, say to 1920, I'll bet you I could look at the census data of people whose demographics change, which means they used to live here, but they don't live here anymore. And the reason that they're not living anymore is because they didn't want to be around that energy. See what I'm saying? So people are seeking their energy niche. They don't want to be around the flat or lower energy when you're running high speed. You prefer to find your energy niche, which is high speed. So when you begin to realize that's how we map on a larger planetary scalar way, we can map what's known as the distribution map of all the frequencies of all the beings that are here in this classroom, that are from all over the place, right? So when you're running a high-powered avatar, you can measure these things. She gives you the equipment to be able to do that with. That's a gift of a goddess. That's why I love her so much. Thank you. That allows you to be able to protect yourself and allows you to use your compass bearing to navigate through the field. Right? Yeah. That's the benefit of being in an avatar and being analog. So we're not binary artificial intelligence. Are you crazy? We're the real McCoy. So that's why the light won. That's how we know these things. See? So I think it was the positive side of 2012 that was mentioning this afternoon about what was it? White hats, Stardate, Stardate. What was it? 11/8 or whatever today's date is. And the lady was mentioning how the white hat military was operating out of Texas. And I thought to myself, well, that wouldn't surprise me. And one of the reasons is because I love history. I love to study history, because how are you going to know how you arrived at this point in time if you don't know how you got there from before when you're in a memory zone? Normally, when you don't run on any memory, when you're operating on high-speed electromagnetic energy that's off the charts, and you're simply in a light spirit body zooming through the cosmos at a high rate of speed, wanting to go wherever the light needs to be restored, right? Then you're always experiencing the highest speed that you can motor from one part of the cosmos to the other, wherever the light has to be restored, right? So when I think about it in that sense of things, I think about the Lone Star State, the Republic of Texas. And of course, you have the Republic of California, too. But I do remember somewhere in time that it was mentioned, not mentioned to me, but I remember in the history that that when Texas made an agreement after the Alamo, when all that was taking place with what's his name, General Sam Houston. Who was the other one? I can't remember the other famous general. Well, General Sam Houston, and when they were sort of ironing out the agreements of Texas becoming a part of the Union or the United States of America, okay, the state of Texas, because of its, how do I put this? The knowledge that the people who were the settlers who came into Texas and began to have a relationship with the local Mexicans, if you will, who were part of, at that time, under Mexico's rule. And then you have the Indians, the local Indians, like Chiricahuas, Apaches, Comanches, I believe, and I forget a lot of the other tribes that are in Texas, had sort of a peaceful coexistence with each other. But when they established the state of Texas to be a part of the Union, they wanted, as part of that agreement, there was an understanding that if the state of Texas decided that it wanted to secede or simply say, listen, we don't want to be a part of the Union any longer because we simply changed our mind and prefer to be a separate, if you will, not isolated, but to be our own state, our own nation state, so to speak, even though you can think of every state as being a nation state. But the state of Texas wanted specifically to have an agreement that as the Lone Star State, it's its own republic. And therefore, it sort of doesn't come under the central control, if you will, of Washington, D.C., which means we consider ourselves a part of but separate from the command and control structure, if you will, of being under the thumb of the municipal government of D.C., which, what is it, the 12 square miles or whatever, D.C., which means it wants to have sort of a separate understanding that, we're part of the group, but we consider ourselves really to be the Lone Star State under our own republic. And so when he mentioned that, I thought, well, that may or may not be true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me. And then, of course, that would seem somewhat logical in a way because I don't think there's any other state in the Union of States that probably has a greater amount of, how do I put it? If you're going to look at the entire United States military as to how many people the military has in uniform, and how many assets they have in terms of hardware, which means armor, infantry, right? Aircraft, Air Force, in other words, all of its military resources in which you have a command and control structure. I do know that the state of Texas with Fort Hood, there's a lot of armor there. In other words, they have an enormous amount of firepower. So if you were to put together a military operation that was going to be used domestically against the other states in order to quell an insurrection, if you will, or an attack that was going to come from within any other states to try and take over other states or the United States of America, Texas would probably be a great state that probably would have the most amount of resources when we talk about keeping your powder dry that is patriotic in terms of maintaining the integrity of the Declaration of Independence, if you will, right? Because if you've ever been to Texas, Texans are very much very independent people, okay? And they don't really take shit from anybody, okay? So if I was to pick a state of all the states that was going to keep its powder dry against any kind of communist or socialist insurgency, it would certainly be Texas, okay? Texas would certainly be the last state that would ever fall to something like that. That state or South Carolina or one of the other southern states, because, and I know that simply because of the fact that I've known about a lot. Everything that's happening now, I've known not only throughout my entire life, but because I've had so many of my friends that I've known over time, including my father, who worked in the higher echelons of X projects, the military, friends of mine that were in the Navy, friends of mine that were in the Marine Corps. I've had a lot of friends of mine that have, how do I put this, have deep roots through the military into long extended families who have been on the soil of the United States of America that predate the old Indian wars, that go all the way back to the 16th century. Okay, which means that the land upon which they have toiled and farmed go back generation after generation after generation after generation, which means these are family bloodlines whose blood is in the soil of that land, particularly in Texas and in the South, that goes way, way, way back to the first white settlers on this continent. Even though us Indians were here long before anybody, other than, I guess, the progenitors, and I believe the reptilians were squatters here at one time before that. I'm not sure. I refer to Patty Broussard for that information because I don't normally keep a lot of things in memory like I'm some encyclopedia, because I want to compile mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of history, because that's not how my mind operates. Okay, I collect data, operate off that data in the beginning in order to, one, figure out how they were programming everybody here. So I only kept the information that was relevant for that job. And then number two is using the other part of my mind, body, spirit, if you will, to have as much fun as I possibly could. So I only kept what information I thought was relevant for future use. Then after I'm done with it, I delete it and get rid of it because that library or that database isn't of any use anymore. Because when you're running unconscious creative memory, it means that everything you're experiencing next is different from the last, which means no memory. So why would you want to build a huge memory database just to build a huge memory database? You see what I'm saying? So I only hold what is relevant. And in the last year and a half, I was deleting huge chunks of library, which are known as memory dumps, because I got no use for the information anymore. It's like once you put a piece of puzzle together, get rid of the puzzle, go on to the next one. Put that puzzle together, go on to the next one. Put that puzzle together, go on to the next one. So in this particular case, when it came to figuring out how they were programming everybody and the nature of how that's going to apply to past, present, future events on a timeline, means that when you already know what the timeline is in the future at 5 years of age, then you're wanting to hold on to certain pieces of information that are relevant, that are going to help assist in the wake-up process to explain to others how this works. Which means I wasn't holding the information on because I needed it for myself. I was holding on to the information for the future value that it would have to help others. You understand how that works? Otherwise, I would simply have just said, you know what? I don't need to be a part of this population. I'm going to go live like Sasquatch and just completely cut myself off from having any kind of putting information into my memory that's of any use, that represents what a Roman Draco civilization represents, because who wants to have information that represents who they are when I'm not who they are? You see what I'm saying? Which sort of means, like, when you're 5 years of age and you don't want any part of this civilization to begin with, I'm checking out now. Because everything that is represented by what they do is obviously going to collapse. And all you got to do is look at the first Roman Empire that collapsed, and you know that. So you already know, and I knew this in 1956, that what they were building in the United States of America is going to collapse. It doesn't take very long to figure that out. So when you know that as a child, it's like, I don't want to be a part of that, right? So I'm out of here. So you can't do that when you're 5 years of age, can you? So you begin to realize that there's a reason why you're a part of that data processing scheme of things, because that's what you're doing. You're processing their data along with your own data, which means the things that represent what you are, which is higher than what that is. So that becomes sort of a database that you operate off of, but you want to maintain the speed that you normally operate off of, but be aware of the data that they operate off of, which is less value than the stuff that you operate off of, because the stuff that I operate off of, which represents data, runs at a higher speed than theirs does. So that sort of gives you an idea of not only your coursework, but the world in which you prefer to live. You want to run on a higher processor speed, which means you're experiencing more of what the light is and what the love is? Or would you rather experience more darkness, which is what less light is? You want to experience everything that is in the light, which means you want to experience everything that represents what love is. So that means you already start out with a benchmark of the realm that you normally occupy, which is outside time. Because that's what love is. Love is timeless because it's priceless.